please help me welcome. I'm going to introduce Steve, and Steve will introduce the rest of the team. So Steve, would you?
Yeah, thank you. I have a mic, so yeah. I might not need one.
These are extra.
Yeah, we'll see. We can see if, oh, there we go. And we might just turn this thing off, man. All right. Where's the, do we have a clicker? Sorry, Q, is that it? Yep. Awesome. Green button, sounds good. There's only so many buttons, I'll figure it out. Okay, thanks very much for coming to our session on OSCAL. We've been following OSCAL since it kind of was incepted a few years ago. And it comes on the back of a couple other standards that if you're in the intelligence community, you might be really familiar with. There's a standard called BOE.XML, which is a US intelligence community standard that's very similar in what it's trying to do with OSCAL. And as a part of what we do with our Xacta product suite, there's also a standard called XDE, which we're going to touch on in a few minutes. And so when NIST and FedRAMP office kind of came together and said, we're partnering together to go after this OSCAL standard, we kind of raised our hands and said, hey, we've got a lot of experience in doing this kind of data exchanges, and we'd love to help out. And so that started, as usual, a long-lasting relationship in the form of that program, which is kind of usual with NIST. We usually have a lot going on with them from time to time. So I'm joined by our colleagues at NIST, and so I'd like to introduce Ms. Vicky Pilatelli. Sorry, I did it wrong again. Sorry, Mr. David Waltermeyer and Ms. Melita Lieskis. Sorry. So this team has been working pretty solidly on OSCAL, and not only OSCAL, but a lot of FedRAMP, and I think we have a lot of really great conversation for you today, give you an update on what's going on with OSCAL, why it's really important, how it gets you through the accreditation process incredibly faster, especially when we talk about why it's from a data perspective, how relevant and valuable it is. And then I think we'll talk about some of these other standards and bring it all together. And I'd like to leave a lot of time for questions. So it's just really, the more engaging and more conversation we can have, it's really good for not just us, but for NIST. And I think that's good for everybody. So, yep, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Vicky.
I guess you hear it? That's it? Try one more.
Is there another one? That one's perfect.
This one works. All right. Good afternoon, guys. So my name is Vicky Pilatelli, and at least for my good friend Steve, he's an equal opportunity mispronouncer, so
yes,
it's not
absolutely.
just me, Mr. Steve Hovath. All right, guys, so my name is Vicky Pilatelli, and I lead the NIST Risk Management Framework team. We are those wonderful or terrible people that bring you that suite of standards used across federal agencies and private sector for risk management. So little-known publications like the NIST Risk Management Framework, those pesky security and privacy controls, and those assessment procedures that we all live and die by. So the point of this talk and the relevance to FedRAMP is obviously the 853 controls serve as that foundation for the standards that are, or the 853 controls serve as that foundation for the FedRAMP controls and the FedRAMP baselines. And as NIST continues to modernize and issue updates to the controls, FedRAMP is, a few steps behind. So really what I want to focus on is the value from standards, the development of standards, and the opportunity for you as stakeholders to participate in that development process to help write your own destiny. So just earlier today, we've released a brand new tool. It's called the NIST 853 Public Comment Site. So now you can submit your comments to NIST on any of the controls that we all see in FedRAMP, that we all see used at the federal agencies, anytime, any place, from the comfort of your smartphone, although I probably recommend doing it in your computer. So not only can you suggest ideas for new controls and control enhancements, you can identify issues or concerns or questions or opportunities for improvement in the existing control catalog or the control baselines. Not only are we doing that, as we go through our public comment period, because NIST values your feedback at every step of the process, whether it's the idea, whether it's contributing to draft controls that are available, to really even after implementation. How can we make this better in the next go around? So you'll also be able to preview, you'll be able to participate in public comment through this website. You'll be able to see your comments move through the process, and you'll also be able to preview pending controls for the next revision of 853. We're moving to a more streamlined and planned process, so you're not going to have to wait. How many years was it between Rev 4 and 5? I think it was 7, and it had countless changes in this, behemoth of a standard. Now, as we move to a regularly scheduled publication schedule, everyone knows Microsoft pushes big patches on Tuesday. Now you'll know that NIST is going to push updates to 853, up to 2 minor ones a year that don't impact control implementation, and 1 major one every 2 years, so you can prepare for, plan for, and better implement the controls. Finally, we can have a standard that keeps up with technology and society as it evolves without being too onerous, right? Next slide, please. So through this new stakeholder engagement resource, you can suggest these controls anytime. You can participate in our public comment periods. You can see other people's comments anonymously and have a dialogue with them of, oh, Dave said this control was a great idea. I agree, but I think you should add this suggestion or that suggestion. More traceability throughout the process, better engagement as a stakeholder. Ultimately, for the last revision of 853, we had over 5,000 comments. Personally, I would love to be able to acknowledge every single person and every single idea that was submitted, because at the end of the day, NIST reviews every single comment that we receive, and we have some really great arguments about how to implement it and what to do next with it. But it's not scalable, right? Now through this system, you can receive a system-generated update email on the status of your comment. Oh, I submitted a comment. NIST is reviewing it now. Oh, my comment has moved forward into a control that's available for public comment. And this really builds that sense of community and gives us that instant gratification, because who doesn't want instant gratification, right? So better transparency, better functionality, and really this whole process also is able to output OSCAL version of the controls, the baselines, and soon in a future release, the 853 alpha assessment procedures. So this way that data set can be up to date and ready to go at any point. So this tool is actually just launched earlier this morning. You can find it at nist.gov/RMF. It's called Public Comments, Submit and View. Try it out. We want your feedback. We want your ideas, and we want to see your ideas get into that catalog, because ultimately we're in it together to build the best of breed resource here for security and privacy risk management. So that's the standards perspective. I'm going to turn it over to Dave as he brings the standard to practice through OSCAL.
Great, thank you, Vicki. Good afternoon. I'm the technical lead at NIST for the OSCAL project. So in that role, I lead the day-to-day development of OSCAL, which is a community-driven set of data formats that are designed to be machine readable. A big part of what we're trying to do is to standardize how you represent a lot of the risk management information that is used as part of the risk management process. And really standardizing it is about reducing a lot of the inertia that can exist in the risk management process when you're dealing with sharing information between organizations or within an organization, moving data between tools. This is really kind of the sweet spot for OSCAL. And so when we got the idea for this, we approached the FISMA team at NIST early on, and we worked with them to develop an OSCAL version of the 853 catalog. And that 853 catalog allows you to import controls, as Vicki is saying. As we update 853, you can import that into your tool. You can use that to select controls as part of the risk management process. OSCAL also allows you to represent security baselines in something we call an OSCAL profile. So when you select a control as part of your baseline for your information system, you can represent that as a profile. You can also download existing baselines, such as the 853 baselines in OSCAL format from the FISMA and OSCAL websites, and use those as the basis for your information system. As you're implementing controls, OSCAL provides a system security plan model that allows the characterization of the system and all of its information. You can describe the specific components of the system in a very fine-grained way. It's really about capturing all of the context of the system in a way that you can't do in an Excel spreadsheet or in a Word document, where you have to have an expert, read the document for hours to try to uncover that context. It's instantly available and searchable within the structured format, and tools like Telos are able to capitalize on that to provide that information to their users. Also in OSCAL is the ability to express things like an assessment plan or assessment results. So as you're preparing for your assessment, you can represent all of the assessment details, what controls you're assessing, what components within your system those controls apply to, how the assessment will be performed, the frequency of the assessment, whether it's continuous or periodic. All of that can be represented in an OSCAL assessment plan. The results of that assessment can be captured in OSCAL using assessment results, as well, which can identify findings, risks. It can point to the low-lying assessment details that were made to factor into those findings and risks. And then finally, you can represent any findings within the assessment as a POAM. We have a model for that, and you can use that within your organization to share that between tools to track the actions that come out of your assessment. And that can provide feedback into the risk management cycle, allowing you to select new controls to address identified risks.
That's a laser pointer.
Oh yeah, sorry. So in addition to the risk management framework, OSCAL also supports DevSecops. So the idea is that so OSCAL has this concept of something called a component, which is a way of representing a building block of an information system, something like a database or a process that you use within a system or a policy within your organization. You can represent that thing and the controls that thing implements in an OSCAL component. This allows you to express a component definition, which describes the control implementation around that thing. You can share these component definitions within your organization, between organizations. These component definitions can be produced as part of the software development lifecycle for that thing. And as it's released, you can release updated information to include updated security and privacy control implementation information. This allows organizations to very quickly import that information into their tools. They can then integrate that into their system security plan, seeding a lot of the implementation narrative that is provided in the component definition. This is a way to allow suppliers of software, hardware, policies, procedures to help organizations basically document how they're implementing those things within their organizations. Organizations can develop their own component definitions for their own organizational policy and procedures. And those can also be imported in the same way. So this allows for sort of a virtual update cycle, which allows, as the components are updated, their component definitions can be updated as part of the SDLC, and those can kind of flow through into the SSP. So as you're updating software dependencies, you can update the security control information that goes along with them. So OSCAL provides a variety of different content resources that are available. So a lot of existing control catalog, baseline, and lots of examples of how to use the SSPs and assessment models. You can find those on the NIST website, where we host all of, the NIST GitHub repo, where we host a lot of those content resources. You can also find a variety of examples, usage guidelines, templates, and implementation guides on the FedRAMP OSCAL GitHub repo. It's FedRAMP Automation, where they provide those resources as well. If you want to learn more about OSCAL, you can check out our OSCAL website at nist.gov/OSCAL. There's a lot of good information here about the basic concepts of OSCAL, documentation on all of the OSCAL models. There's links to existing tools that support OSCAL there, and also information on how to contribute to the OSCAL project. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Melitza.
Thank you.
You have a mic, though.
I do.
Oh, yes.
Can you? All right.
Oh, no.
Is it working?
Sorry.
How about now?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, I don't need this one. I'm going to take this off since I have accent and you guys are not going to be able to understand me. My name is Milica Lieskic, and I am a cloud security architect and compliance expert by day, and by night I manage my own company. But how I got here, I've been working with Talos for over 4 years now, and we've really started our journey by developing or architecting Xacta for FedRAMP users. And now we've got to the point where we are actually expanding that capability and adding OSCAL support within Xacta. So right now what we have within Xacta, we have created a support for OSCAL for SSP export. And what that really means, we will really use our FedRAMP application that is specific to FedRAMP and DoD or FedRAMP Plus or DoD SRG. And our current users can export data from Xacta using OSCAL capability that is in XML format. Right now we're supporting information such as system information, data, system characteristics, metadata, system architecture, and all that. Everything that's up the stack of I'm just really describing the system as it is. All right, so how we got here, I'll start and then you can.
Sure.
All right. So before we get into how we got here, I just need to give you a little bit of a background of Xacta 360, what that looks like for those of you who haven't had a chance to play with it or actually work with Xacta. So Xacta is a web-based application that is used to streamline and streamline the authorization and assessment of one system. It consists of different elements such as folders, projects, process steps, and tasks. So when we zoom in and take a look at each one of these elements, you'll see the folders are just kind of like a folders that you would store your data. In this case, you will store your projects. Projects are actually where the magic happens when it comes to authorization and assessment. That's where all the process steps, it consists out of process steps. They're pretty much just the collection points of data that we take and then map towards the documentation that you need, which is the body of evidence that you need. And then we use tasks to group those process steps, logically group them, and use workflows to manage how you go from one task to another, right? The reason I'm telling you about this is because we're going to be referring to these things down to, during this presentation, so I just want to make sure that you understand it. So when a user starts with Xacta, they will pick out one framework they're looking to comply with. That can be either NIST or MAF or FedRAMP or CMMC, ISO, whatnot. So they will start with the one project, which is called, which we usually refer to as a template, and everybody starts from the same template. But uniqueness of Xacta is that if really you can make changes and tweaks and make it your own. So at the end of that process, every organization kind of ends up with their own unique project. So now, not having the same data types, you can now share this data across the project. So that's where the whole challenge began. So a few years back, we recognized this challenge, and then we started to implement something which we called body of evidence XML.
And by that, we use the CNSSI 1254 guidance that comes with an XML format in the back that will give you all the information about the data enumeration, the cardinalities, and so forth. So we use that and we mapped it towards Xacta process steps in order to export the body of evidence in an XML format. And that was great. It was a great step forward. But again, it had certain limitations. It was focused towards one group of customers, and only if you were using that BOE, like a body of evidence, this is what you consider a body of evidence, then you can really take advantage of this. But no one else could have used it. So then since we recognized that, we're like, okay, so now we have to expand on this capability, which the Xacta data exchange came in play. So now we're able to export and import data in XML format, and I believe JSON. And then we are able, so from this one, you can export the SSP, the artifacts that come with it, and I believe right now users as well. So you're able to move the data easily across different organizations, different projects. So why is this really important for us? Because our customers can now share their data with someone else who's using Xacta, or just internally. What we've recognized that our customers need to comply with multiple different frameworks, so it is easy for them to share certain data that is the same across different projects. They can share that data easily now. And then, of course, OSCAL came around, and we were really excited to start getting into that and really understanding how we can build what we currently have. Like how can we use that as a foundation and start building on top of that using OSCAL schema? And go into that more, but did you want anything else?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just add that I've spent 15 years helping deploy our product suite across our customer base, and I have yet to meet any two customers that run the process the same way. So when you start looking at agencies, for instance, throughout the federal government, and they're sharing, they do all this work. They spend a year sometimes to get this body of evidence together to go through and get their authorization. And then they hand it off to another agency, but it's in that original agency's format. It's gone through the process the way they do it. Maybe they're organizationally built out in a different way. It just made it very difficult. And then you get a little bit of this, well, it wasn't invented here and our people didn't do it, so we're going to go back and maybe we'll check all your work over again, thus extending that time for authorization or reuse inside of another customer agency. And you get to EDE, which is basically our implementation of how do we take and decouple these things that are essential, these data elements that are relevant to really the security posture and the authorization of the system, from the templates and the logos and the process in and of itself, the approvals and whose role is assigned to what. We take all of that and we're able to fit it into a different template from a different customer, because we're just pulling that relevant data, as long as we can all agree to, what that relevant data is, and put it into another format. And it sounds really simple, but it's extraordinarily complex. It's almost like upgrading from one set of processes inside of a workflow system to another set of processes where you might have removed some steps, added some steps. You've got to go through this mapping process. We solved that problem a little while ago, actually 10 or 15, 12 years ago, with something called our, the propagation utility. But when you're taking this and decoupling it from the way in which an organization walks through their risk management framework, and you're decoupling that from the data in and of itself so it can be easily and quickly kind of used by other organizations, we see a lot of value in that. Not just for the IC, obviously, but especially for FedRAMP and for the rest of, the communities that are going to take advantage of it. And really where this, I think, pays a lot of dividends is with inheritance. And we'll probably touch on that in a few minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the OSCAL layer stack, which I'm sure some of you have already seen. So for all of you who don't know how OSCAL is built, it's pretty much built on on layers. So you have the foundational layer, and every layer on top of that builds one on another, right? So you start with a category layer, then you go to the profile, then you have implementation, then assessment, and assessment result layer. So when we started this journey, we really looked into to see what milestones we want to achieve, and then we also broke them down into subsequent parts to make sure we can, deliver on those milestones. So we started, and you can see that right in the middle, we wanted to make sure that we can export the SSP and the XML format and support our current FedRAMP customers. So starting from there, we start looking at how we can map the OSCAL data when it comes to the system information, like authorization boundary, your network diagrams, your ports, protocol services, all of that information that's really important, that's building, like that is just the foundation of your system. So we were able to deliver on that milestone back in August. So Xacta 1.7 version already is offering that capability, so you can actually export it. But currently, we're also working on adding the other components that are missing to export the full SSP, which is building on, including the catalog layer, which is provided by NIST, and also including the profile layer, which is provided by FedRAMP. We're starting off with the FedRAMP Moderate and FedRAMP High, and eventually we'll support FedRAMP Low as well. Again, going up the stack, we do plan to support the assessment layer and assessment results layer. We're just prioritizing things as we see our customers need.
Absolutely.
And so just a few screenshots to show you what that looks like in Xacta. So this is the first thing that you would need to enable. If you're using Xacta, you as an administrator, which is in Xacta where it's master administrator, you would have to enable it because it's not enabled by default. So you will see that there's a essential data exchange. You enable that, which all really does, it allows your users to now export the data in either one of the formats that we already discussed. So BOE, XML, EDE, or the OSCAL format. And so when you will look, have a closer look into the folder, which we discussed before. So within a folder now you can see there are two different projects. To the right, you can see that you can export data in OSCAL there. And even closer look into the actual project. So you can see that you have different options of where you can see and how you can export the data. So once you click on that export of the data, the file will be generated and it will be stored back into the Xacta database. So once you can either go back there and you can click to view, or you can just download it and send it over to authorizing official or provide it to the users. And whoever is familiar with the OSCAL can recognize the language right in there. That must be you. So what we have on a roadmap right now. Right now, we're working. Our dev team is working on supporting an OSCAL control catalog layer, and then from there expanding to ensure that we can publish all the control implementations within the SSP, and then building. So really, what we're doing, we're trying to build the mapping files between OSCAL catalog controls and the Xacta controls. But what we really are excited about is going beyond that and supporting our customers when it comes to the inheritance. And inheritance is one of the most important things, I believe, when it comes to the cloud computing. Most of cloud service providers don't understand what their responsibility is. So the shared responsibility model is kind of vague for everyone. But being able to get that package from your underlying provider or from any other third provider that is giving you some kind of a services, right? Being able to understand what controls are applicable to you and what controls are taken care of by that provider, I think it's essential for having a successful FedRAMP journey. So in addition to that, we're really excited to be supporting other frameworks beyond FedRAMP. OSCAL is such a robust and really fully thought out framework that can be used across other frameworks, not only FedRAMP, of course, but we're starting where we see our customers have the greatest need. Absolutely, and I think that it's there's a lot of joint effort going on between the FedRAMP PMO and obviously NIST on working on OSCAL. We're a part of all of that, but where this can go, I think, in the future, it's not just about when you talk about inheritance. People really, if you haven't had your elbows deep in doing assessment and authorization work, people bring up inheritance and they just say, "Oh, you just inherit some set of controls." Well, that is putting it mildly. Right, the idea of shared responsibility and the idea of shared controls, not just understanding what portions of a given control you're responsible for is difficult, right? But also, if you're going to take advantage of some of what these cloud service providers have to offer for you, how do you do that in a way that's consistent with the intent of that control, right? So how do you do that in a way that is well documented? Say, if you're going to leverage, EC2, for instance, you need to make sure that your IAM roles are set this way. You need to make sure that this, and then this meets the intent of the control. But this is a portion of the control that you have responsibility for. It's not the responsibility of the cloud service provider.
So making sure that this all eventually kind of makes it into a machine readable language so that those are prioritized and really well understood, and they can be kind of navigated much more simply than, again, to Dave's point, the narrative that we usually have to read through when we talk about controls implementation is going to pay dividends long term. So I think that's really important to mention. So I also wanted to mention that we're going to have a session tomorrow that would be worth stopping by. We're going to be talking about a joint partnership we have with Splunk and Stack Armor. Telos has a joint partnership with Splunk and Stack Armor on something called our FASTR initiative, FASTTR. And it's all about trying to move more quickly through the ATO process. Please come by and listen to our discussion. It's going to be very enlightening about how you can build upon kind of these known good states, leverage all this good work to really get you through the process much faster. And with that, we have about half of our time left for questions, which is exactly what we wanted. So,
I think there are mics on either side if you want to step up and ask a question.
Super. Yeah. So keep in mind that this is an emerging standard. That's one thing I'd add. OSCAL is not what you would, I wouldn't say it's in its infancy. It's not, certainly not fully baked, but it's kind of in its toddler form right now. There's a lot of good work going on and what will be the next iteration of including, major portions of what that OSCAL standard is. But it's a good opportunity if you don't know much about it or you have some thoughts on it, ask some questions, and we've got the right people here to chat about it.
Yeah, Steve, thank you. Robert Seipel, Kratos Defense, work on the cybersecurity advisory, and that's been a big question that we've been getting from our customers is what is the maturity of this program as a whole? I think starting with from NIST, FedRAMP, what is the relationship there? I think there's a lot of gray area there that we're at least getting feedback in terms of, the maturity of the program. When am I going to be expected to deliver my SSP and my POAM and all of these things in an OSCAL format? And at the same time, from a 3PAO perspective, when can we expect to be able to have to ingest OSCAL type results as a 3PAO and then write ATPs, to that. So very interested in the overall maturity model, if you will,
Sure.
as a path. Where would you say we were at on a scale of 1 to 5?
So since I am not at the NIST organization and I am not a part of the FedRAMP PMO, I'm going to give you an authoritative answer.
Excellent.
No, I think the best way to think about it honestly is that NIST is great at giving you guidance and giving you the tools that you need to be successful, but they don't tend to be overly prescriptive. I think the FedRAMP PMO will be in time, but to my knowledge, there is not a drop-dead date for you must have all OSCAL, all SSPs submitted via OSCAL. Now, if I'm a betting man, which I tend to be on occasion, anything that you can do to make it easier on the FedRAMP PMO to ingest and review your package is going to bode well for you. So if you're going to drop off a PDF full of documents or email them or upload it to FedRAMP Connect or whatever, and it's going to be in your standard boilerplate FedRAMP stuff, that's one way to do it. But if you give them the opportunity to submit their SSP in OSCAL and they can pull it into their OSCAL reader and immediately look for all the things, I can't say with any kind of certitude, right? But I think it might bode really well as you get prioritized.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the question is we're hearing kind of mixed signals in the industry about FedRAMP's capability to even accept.
Yeah, I think FedRAMP's trying to take a crawl, walk, run approach, when it comes to OSCAL. And, they're right now actively working with CSPs that are interested in submitting an OSCAL, and they're going to do that and learn from that and work on improving their process. OSCAL represents a significant improvement in how the packages are reviewed. If you look at it today, it can take somewhere in the order of 2 weeks for an assessor to review a FedRAMP package, and if there's anything wrong with it, it gets kicked back, revised, and you start the whole process over. That sort of passback problem that FedRAMP has today creates a huge amount of inertia in the overall process, and a lot of dissatisfaction amongst all of the stakeholders in the process. And so one of the things that they're doing is they're releasing automated checks that you can run against the OSCAL package, which will allow you to detect a lot of the common problems that they see as part of their assessment. They're trying to raise the quality of the initial assessment so that they can reduce the number of passbacks that are occurring. And so they're tooling up on those types of assessment checks right now. They've released a couple of versions of those so far. We just recently released an OSCAL 1.0 2-3 months back. And so now that is stable and we're kind of in a maintenance mode going forward, I think we'll start to see a lot more of that type of tooling capability on the FedRAMP side.
Well, and we see from a customer perspective similar. I mean, we have a great relationship with Kratos. We see a lot of customers that are kind of champing at the bit to start to delivering their, I mean, especially the CSPs, right? They're eager to support and submit in OSCAL to kind of lower the burden. So I think that, and my understanding is the PMO can accept SSPs in OSCAL right now.
Yes.
Yeah, so they can accept. It's not a requirement, but again, anybody who's been through FedRAMP knows that if there's something you can do to make it even the littlest bit easier, it's very much worth it. It's going to translate to cost savings. I can guarantee. I can stand up here and guarantee that. Anybody?
Yeah. This is maybe the second or third. I'm sorry, the third or fourth XML-based compliance framework I've seen either at the DoD, USDS had one for a little while. 18F put out one in 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what lessons were learned, if any of those teams were incorporated into the OSCAL project, but more importantly, sort of what's new? What sets OSCAL apart from these iterative efforts that have come before?
Yeah, well, we looked at a lot of that prior work when we started OSCAL. And in fact, we reached out very early in the development of OSCAL to the open control community, which I think is the 18F effort that you're referring to. Yeah, Aiden.
Yeah, Aiden was on.
And we asked them, what's working well with what you've done, what's not working well with what you've done. We talked about some of the features that we were interested in implementing in OSCAL. We asked them to participate in the community, which they started to do. A lot of good ideas for OSCAL came out of that process. I think one thing that's important to highlight here is that OSCAL is really a community-driven effort. We are doing all of the work in an open source way out on GitHub, where the community actively is participating. They're submitting issues for feature requests and any bug reports. We work with the community to address those. We host a couple of regular weekly conference calls to interact with the community, to share new ideas that we have, to collect their input on that, to allow them to ask us to implement new features and to talk about their use cases, as well as to demo tools and other solutions that they're building to the rest of the community. I think that's one thing that makes this effort different than some of the others, is really the degree of community engagement that we have around this, and a commitment to continuing that.
I would agree, and just to tag on to that comment, we've got 20 years experience in transferring data from one project, like from one system to another, from our perspective. We used to do this via something called a WCA file, right? We then started pursuing this line that one of the intelligence community was going really hard after the standard BOE XML. We worked with them. We learned a lot of lessons. There's a lot of mistakes in that standard that we had to help correct and rectify. We built it into what we call inside of our Xacta platform is EDE, right? But that gave us a layer of abstraction. Through EDE, we can support OSCAL, BOE XML, or our XDE, which is kind of our own secret sauce version of it. And we brought all of that to NIST and tried to give them all the, hey, lessons learned, you're going to run into this and that, and if you don't do this with control implementations, you're going to have a problem if you don't like. So I couldn't agree more with Dave. I think that the fact that in true NIST fashion, it's not developed in a closet somewhere, right? It's out and open and transparent. People all have the opportunity to participate, and you know, it gives everybody an opportunity to let them voice their concerns or those experiences. And so I would agree wholeheartedly.
I just wanted to add one other last thing to that. And I think another characteristic of OSCAL that makes it a little bit different is it's actually technically control catalog and risk management framework agnostic in how we're doing things.
Yep, absolutely.
And so where you have open control or some of the prior agency efforts, they were built around a very specific solution, like 853 or the federal risk management standards. We're endeavoring to be a little bit larger than that so that we can serve a wider audience, while we are working very closely with our own colleagues on the federal risk management side. And I think that also helps the OSCAL effort because it's being considered for use in other countries and other sectors where the federal stuff doesn't necessarily apply. And we're able to get those stakeholders and their ideas engaged in the effort, which I think helps improve it overall.
So I'm going to come at this from the developer side because I'm actually a CTO. So I just watch the security team copy pasting from developer comments, descriptions into Excel spreadsheets, and it drives me crazy.
Please no.
So I want to understand the composability model. So we're trying to do a use case where all of our infrastructure is Terraform and Ansible, and there is no reason why I couldn't generate an SSP in my GitLab CI/CD flow, on a merge request, right? Is it possible to do that kind of a model with this from a composability standpoint?
It is. I mean, OSCAL is designed to be composable in that way. There's a few ways that OSCAL supports composability. There's the component capability that I was talking about a little bit earlier that allows you to, think of your system as building blocks that you can assemble together, that you can compose up together to create an information system. We support something called a leveraged authorizations model where you can compose up systems as well. So you can define a relationship arc between systems. You can define what controls the leverage system exports. You can define the controls that the leveraging system imports. You can define the customer responsibilities that are part of that export-import relationship. And that supports the shared security model that Melitza was talking about earlier. Those are a couple of the ways in OSCAL that OSCAL supports composability. I think it's possible to do what you're talking about in CI. I think the question right now is, does the tooling exist to support that? Some of that is emerging. If you're interested in that, maybe that's something that you could help develop.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing lots of Sphinx, docstring extraction of control, documentation in the Python source code and stuff. So we're trying to build that sort of thing kind of on the fly, and I'd like to find better ways to do it.
Yeah, there was a couple cool projects where they were doing some of that stuff out of NGA, I believe. It was some of the ATO and a day work that Jason Hess started years and years and years ago. So if you haven't had any experience with that, that's a good place to look at some of what they were doing. The only thing I'd caution you is that the developers are rarely security professionals, right? They're usually really good at writing code, but they're really bad at understanding how something is implementing valuable against a given security control. So trying to take and assemble all of developer comments, from that early piece of Terraform and Ansible doesn't usually net out an SSP in the traditional way you'd think about one. So.
Great briefing, guys. Thank you. I have a question on, curious on the NIST perspective of continuous ATO versus ATO. Over the last year or so, you see a lot on LinkedIn. We have our CATO, we don't need to do an ATO. And I think there's a lot of misinformation on what the CATO actually consists of, and curious your thoughts.
So really, it goes back to the concept of ongoing authorization. You can brand it as whatever you'd like. I actually think private sector is much better at coming up with branding than NIST, right? But at the end of the day, it's the senior accountable official within the federal agency understands the risks to that system as it's operating and continuously accepts those risks. What kind of information they're getting through their GRC tools. Pick your favorite. Maybe it's Xacta. Maybe. Pick your favorite tool. What kind of information is being delivered to that person that understands and accepts the risk to allow that system to stay in operation? Candidly, and this is only anecdotal because NIST doesn't have a role in terms of compliance or, overseeing implementation, getting to that concept of ongoing authorization where it's, you're leveraging a dashboard and you can have your cybersecurity risk posture delivered to you at any given moment, and there's good metrics to evaluate that, is candidly a big challenge for a lot of agencies. So we still see a lot of organizations on this, mythical 3-year assessment cycle where, oh, I'm authorized for 3 years, I don't have to worry about that. At the end of the day, yeah, you might have a paperwork package that says you're okay for 3 years, but the world around us is changing. Threats to your system, the interconnections made between your system and everything else out in the internet, it's changing dynamically. So maybe it's time for us all broadly to take a shift away from that one-time compliance exercise to leveraging some of the tools, through automation, through these data schemas and formats, to be able to understand what's happening in our systems and organizations and better be able to respond and monitor them on an ongoing basis. So I'm always precautious when I hear about, oh yeah, we can do a CATO anytime, right? Maybe you have a tool that can do that, but is the organization ready to do that? Are they able to put good data into that tool or that solution to get you the right kind of data about your risk posture? Garbage information in, garbage info out, right?
Well said. I also think it's funny that, in the same way that people still stuck on, I'm free for 2 more years or 3 years, there's still some organizations that I'm aware of are still assessing against 853 Rev 3. Right? So they're about 2 revs back on the way that they're even looking at controls.
They're going to be really angry with us then when we issue Rev 6.
Yeah.
Hi guys, thanks. Really good brief. I had a question about, we've said that the FedRAMP PMO is now ready to take a package in OSCAL. Are you working with any other agencies for a CSP that's looking for an agency ATO as opposed to a JAB ATO?
I think that's for you.
The NIST OSCAL team is not, but I believe the GSA FedRAMP team is looking for those types of scenarios for agencies that are interested. So I would encourage any agency that's interested in that use case to reach out to the FedRAMP PMO.
Now, also anecdotally, that I have heard from various agencies that they are incredibly vested and interested in using OSCAL, not just for their cloud solutions, but internally as well. And I would say that's probably a safe bet, without naming any names, that if they're looking at using this internally, they're looking for their partners, whether they be cloud or service providers in any way, to also be doing the same, because let's make life easier for all of us, right?
Yeah, given you're a third-party vendor and you're looking to take your system into one of these agencies, something like a standard like this really lowers your barrier to entry. If you've already gone through the process and you have this in that format, you actually have a way to immediately ingest it if that organization is accepting OSCAL, right? As opposed to, your standard paper format, which it's a different way of looking at it.
Sure. If you're a commercial or an open source provider, OSCAL provides facilities through component definitions to allow you to document how the thing you produce implements security controls, and that's a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? We are running out of time, so we're pretty good if nobody wants to ask one more. One thing I would want to mention, I think Dave brought it up also, when we talk about this standard, the fact that it's not based on NIST's risk management framework or 853 in particular, the fact that it actually is something that can be extensible out past that is hugely advantageous. We saw the cybersecurity framework get downloaded all over the world, and it's being referenced internationally as a major standard. That's a really good example of how the good work that happens at NIST gets taken and goes far and wide, well beyond what you kind of originally thought the standards were going to be implemented by or who's going to use them. The same can be said for the 853 Rev 5 or the 837 Rev 2, where they've amended it so that it's not so, geared toward federal systems. It's important to note that, as more and more privacy concerns happen and more privacy standards and more security concerns happen and more security standards emerge, trying to map all of that across for an organization, especially an organization in the heavily regulated world, is if you're still using tablets and chisels, which I would like to call spreadsheets, you're in big trouble. You're going to have something that you can really manage these multiple standards, because they just don't map one for one. There's a lot of nuance and understanding the difference between a control for an ISO 27001 or 2002 and RMF, version 5. So.
Yeah, and just to add to that, when we were looking at building OSCAL in the early days, we made that conscious decision to make it broader than just the NIST approach, because we were recognizing that it's one argument to get commercial tools to adopt OSCAL because it supports federal customers. It's a much easier argument to get commercial tools to adopt OSCAL if we're supporting a broader approach that they can apply to other customers and other regions and other sectors. And so we made a conscious effort to do that, because of that reason.
Yeah, I get asked all the time, why would you guys support, if you just have Xacta as a platform, why would you support the standard? It makes it easier for people to get their data out of Xacta. And I say all the time, well, our product stands on its own. It's been around for 20 years. It's the best, to me, it's the best risk management product you can have. So the more easy we make it for our customers to leverage the data of the good work they're doing in Xacta, or to ingest via OSCAL, the more powerful we're empowering the better we're making life for all of our customers. It's obvious to me. So I think that's it. No other questions? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Perfect. Please QR code the screen and submit your feedback. We love getting feedback for sessions. It helps us plan for the future.